learned to love Motorhead through the history of rock and roll and, like I mentioned, the regular touring cycle that Motorhead had in America, plus him moving to LA and building up a cult following.
Exactly, yeah. Like, I honestly don't know if there is a band out there that can ever really achieve the same status as Motorhead. And nor do I think there really should be, because there's only really room for one of their caliber. And it's basically, yeah, I can always compare it to another form of art out there. I mean, there are many people that would actually say, you know, that there are certain fantasy books that are this generation's Lord of the Rings, but that's basically the same as saying Lord of the Rings was ever replaceable in the first place. They can't have, you know, a second rendition. They can have something that may mean as much to some people, but it will never top the original. Motorhead for the win, and yeah, remember them. They play rock and roll. They are the band that defined everything to be a rock star.
Another thing that was such a shame was the fact that you had a member of the original Motorhead die in November, which was Phil the Animal Taylor, and then just a month and a half later, Lemmy, who obviously is, like you mentioned, who is Motorhead, died, and so the only original member you've got left is Fast Eddie Clarke, and he's a great musician. He was in a band I really liked called Fast Away, who did the soundtrack for a great cult horror movie Halloween film called Trick or Treat, which has got Gene Simmons and Ozzy Osbourne in, who make cameo appearances. And of course, it makes you wonder now what's going to happen with Mickey D and Phil Campbell, because Phil Campbell's got the All-Star Band, who I've actually seen, and I saw them at the Joiners in Southampton, and he doesn't sing, he just plays guitar, but they just play Motorhead classics. And so he may carry that on, but he may get bored of it after a while. We don't know what's going to... Obviously, Mickey D's Swedish, and we know the history that Sweden has with rock music. A big history. Lots of sleazy music's come from there. Obviously, Europe are from there.
Yeah, the Rock the Night anthem, that is pretty much one of those many great feel-good anthems that you'll never get enough of.
That's it, and I think, aren't Lordi Swedish? No, they're Finnish, my mistake.
Wait, what? Who?
Lordi.
Lordi, how do you spell that?
Lordi. No, they're Finnish band.
Yeah, they're Finnish.
Yeah. But other Swedish bands, you've got the likes of Hardcore Superstar, Crash Diet. They're a few of like the sleazier bands. The rock in Sweden, you've got Heat as well. These are a few of like more hair metal related bands. So that's just me mentioning some of the Swedish bands that have been around past decade or so. But yeah, as for Motorhead, I think playing their music for the rest of your life is the way of paying tribute to an absolute icon, legendary figure who will be missed, never forgotten, and hopefully over the next 5 years or so we can get a few rock bands to really fill in the slot that they've left behind. I know it's hard, but like we said, we need the next. We've lost. Okay, I know we'll go into detail soon, but in 2016 there'll be no Motley Crue because they've retired. There'll be no Motorhead. There'll be no Stone Temple Pilots, and for that reason, legendary bands have gone. They need replacing with the next breed.
And on that, Shell, let me say this, just to end off this topic. For those of you who feel that Lemmy is dead and therefore rock and roll is dead, I need to say this. Lemmy would probably say, don't be ridiculous, man. Because Lemmy may well have been the man that everything had to fit around, but he has a legacy that has transcended, living or dying. Lemmy is alive in the spirit of rock and roll, because that spirit was never made to die. Lemmy didn't physically invent it, but he is the man that better than Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley for sure, and any other rock band that came even remotely close to them. Lemmy was the man that just gave the whole idea of what it means to go on. Don't let his death depress you to the point where you say that rock has now officially run completely into the ground, because Lemmy's legacy by itself transcends any other musician of his timeline, and rock and roll as a whole, he would probably say, is bigger than he ever felt he could be as a person.
Very true. And one thing that we haven't mentioned yet that I'll just finish with is one of the greatest bass players of all time. Absolute, brilliant, fantastic, fast, heavy. His style of bass playing hadn't been done before him. You know, I know Steve Harris was very fast, but that was after Lemmy. So you could say that that's another thing that he founded, was his style of bass playing, which has been copied but never matched since.
Indeed.
So,
moving on.
Moving on. What we're about to talk about now is something that is older news than the death of Lemmy. It is the death of one of alternative music's great frontman, one of the most versatile singers I've ever listened to, and a guy who, with all the highs, has had many lows. Scott Weiland, who is best known as the frontman of Stone Temple Pilots between the years of 1985 to 2013. He was then fired and then obviously passed away this year. They replaced him with Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, who quit Stone Temple Pilots about 2 weeks before Scott was dead. So it made you think Scott might be coming back, but that obviously wasn't the case. Yeah. He was also the lead singer of the supergroup Velvet Revolver, who were around from 2002 to 2008. And he also had a solo career consisting of 2 albums on his own, 1 album with his band The Wildabouts, and he made a Christmas album in 2011 which was made up of holiday classics. Scott is very much a guy who doesn't keep his foot on the ground with one band. He likes mixing it up. Lemmy has also had his ups and downs, but there's a difference. With Lemmy, he just moved on, didn't care. With Scott, his demons ended up catching up with him in terms of lying to his fans, his bandmates, his family, his wife, children, and, you know, he said he was clean for 15 years and then he OD'd.
Yeah.
So, and I've heard from lots of people, you know, Scott Weiland will be remembered as a great frontman with lots of troubles, and even though he kept having so many last chances, in headlines when he joined Velvet Revolver, his last chance, because he'd been arrested about 8 times before then whilst he was famous.
Yeah. And
the reason why he kept getting let out of prison was because he was rich and famous, and
so he always had the money to bail himself out.
That's it. He eventually, the only way he could make money in the end was by touring, because record sales obviously stopped once he got fired from the big bands, and him getting divorced twice, plus having kids to feed that he didn't see, plus several rehabs, because rehab is very expensive.
Yeah.
And that's why his bandmates used to get really frustrated with him, because they just used to say to him, you know, you want to go to rehab, you pay for it. You're costing us money for touring. We are a 4 or 5 piece band, not one person, because Scott was very ego driven. And what's such a shame is back in the early days of Stone Temple Pilots, he seemed like a really just cool guy, you know. He obviously had a bit of an ego, but if you see his early interviews in the early days of STP, he just seemed like a front man with a bit of an attitude, but was hard-working, driven. At the time, he wasn't a junkie. Obviously, he drank a lot and smoked a lot, but heroin was never in his life at the time. And in the end, everything in his life just ended up getting weaker.
Yeah.
His body got weaker, his face got weaker, his songwriting got weaker, and it got to the point where he was just a very frustrated, moody man, and life just went like that. And he died at age 48, which is really sad for a man, for any human being to die, but any rock star who seemed indestructible. But Scott got skinnier, he got weaker, and he kept saying, I'm clean, I'm clean, I'm clean. He was never clean, and you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, you've actually met Scott Weiland, and you told me the other night as well, amongst the many things that we cover in just an evening, like that you actually had the theory that after he had done his stuff on stage, he went out and then he decided to sniff up some stuff, and then he just went out to meet his fans. Wrong choice of things to do. Like, you could have at least tried to meet your fans before you would just take that route.
That's it, and you can tell by the way he was looking at people, and I had a chat with him, and he was all right.
Yeah.
He just refused to have a photo with me because he didn't really have a picture with hardly anyone, because he just said he was tired and he doesn't like having pictures with his fans when he's tired. And when he was looking at his fans, he was nodding a lot but wasn't really getting involved in conversation. He just seemed high as a kite. Don't know if he was high or whether that's just the way he behaved, but it's just really strange because, you know, if you watch interviews with him, he just, over the years in the STP and Velvet Revolver days, he just, every time he got asked a question by an interviewer, he just straight answered like any human being would, like we would, like Lemmy would, like other rock stars would. But past few years in interviews that Scott's had, he's just been very sarcastic and very one-word answers, very, no, I don't like doing that. You know, a lot of can't be fucked kind of attitude. That gig, by the way, that I saw him at, it was a great gig, by the way. I really enjoyed it. It was at the garage in London. It was very small. It got postponed twice. It originally, it was meant to happen in October of 2014. He then put a status. Oh yeah, we found out about two nights before about it being cancelled, which obviously led most of the fans who were going to that gig, because it was sold out originally. It left them pissed off and frustrated. How come we only know 2 nights before? And what was the excuse? The excuse was Scott basically said, we're going over to Europe for one show, what's the point? But then it makes you think, why are you only having one show on in the first place? And then it was got rescheduled for April. His guitar player then of the Wildabouts died. The reasons haven't been confirmed, but I reckon it's drugs. I reckon Scott Weiland's current band, the Wildabouts, were just a bunch of junkies, and 2 of the members are now dead. And their bass player, Tommy Black, who I also met in London, got caught with cocaine on him the night that Weiland died, so he was arrested. So it makes you just presume band of junkies. And when the gig eventually did happen, it was a really good night, and he played Stone Temple Pilots classics. His new album, Blaster, is great. And he was, you know, one of the members of Shinedown said this. In terms of talent, he said Weiland was as good a frontman and as good a singer as anyone. He said he was his favourite singer since Freddie Mercury, which I know for me is a little bit over the top, but Weiland was generally that good. Scott Weiland sang with the Doors. You know, obviously Morrison died a few decades before Scott sang with them, but he was the guy who was he was a chameleon. Yeah. Scott Weiland is a big fan of David Bowie. Scott Weiland used to change his image. He used to change his vocal style. He changed his music style. He was the ultimate chameleon. He was the David Bowie of the 90s. Yeah. There was elements of Iggy Pop in there. There was elements of John Lennon, Jim Morrison. There was elements of, who else could you say? Even like Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious. Yeah. There was elements of them as well in terms of image and sound. Yeah. Scott Weiland could make a hair metal album. He could make a punk album. He could make a grunge album. He could make an art album.
The way his image changed from the timeline. Like, he used to be as buff as Chris Robshaw, the England captain in rugby, and now, like, at one point, he just became as skinny as Sid friggin' Vicious.
Yes, and a lot of that is due to heroin. Heroin didn't destroy his career completely, but long term it did. Because Stone Temple Pilots' first 2 records made them probably at the time one of the biggest bands in the world. When you think of grunge music, the big 4 come to mind. You think of Alice in Chains, you think of Soundgarden, you think of Pearl Jam, and you think of Nirvana. The other alternative grunge band from that era who sold just as many records as all of them was Stone Temple Pilots. The reason why STP don't get mentioned as much as them is because Stone Temple Pilots were late. They were about 2 years behind the other bands. And also, when Core, their debut album, came out, now considered a classic, it's got Sex Type Thing, it's got Plush, it's got Cracker Man, it's got Creep, it's got Dead and Bloated, now considered a classic. When it came out, the critics slammed it for saying you're a Pearl Jam ripoff. This is basically Pearl Jam Part 2. But then when the second album, Purple, came out, the critics completely shut up and said, these guys are good. This album is fresh. It doesn't sound like other things. Interstate Love Song, which is a classic hit song, absolutely brilliant. And everything was going on the up. And Stone Temple Pilots were rock stars, -- in the chart. Yeah. And what could go wrong? Then Scott got addicted to heroin and they had to cancel a US tour. They were meant to support Kiss on Kiss's reunion tour in Makeup in 1996, and they had to pull out because of Weiland drug problems. Yeah. Then they went on hiatus where Scott got even more into drugs, And essentially, he ended up having a big falling out with his bandmates because the other three always felt like they were against Weiland. The DeLeo brothers and Eric Kretz felt like it was them against him.
Yeah.
You know, we've got this ego. Scott Weiland is the face of Stone Temple Pilots. I'm not going to say he is Stone Temple Pilots like the way Lemmy's Motorhead, but he was the face because of the voice, the music videos. Because STP made some great videos, great hit songs, Vaseline, you know, Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart, Sour Girl. Sarah Michelle Gellar is in one of their music videos.
Yeah, Buffy ended up doing a tribute. So yeah, Sarah Michelle Gellar definitely saw some great stuff in Scott Weiland and his talent. So yeah, take that to everyone out there. SMG.
Yeah, exactly. And what ended up happening was because of the drug problems and also Stone Temple Pilots, even though he had his drug problems, were always a brilliant live band. When Scott was on stage, he was a figure to behold.
Yeah.
Him and his megaphone, his vocal styles, the way he flamboyantly drifted and danced across the stage.
Yeah.
I know you could say Iggy, other people did it first. You know, a lot of the stuff he did, other people did first, unlike Lemmy. But Scott did it in a way which was dangerous, which is one of the reasons why Slash, Duff, and Matt from Guns N' Roses were looking for a singer for their new project. It took them a year to find it. They originally they wanted someone amazing and they were going for regular people and it didn't happen. And then as soon as Scott Weiland, who at the time was still on drugs, he walked in the room, they felt a presence even before he went up to sing. And then he sang a song called Set Me Free and they were like, that's the guy. That guy is what we've been looking for. He is dangerous, he is talented, he can work in a unit, he's versatile, he can write a song in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
He will get our band huge, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And let me tell you this message goes out to everyone who has never listened to Velvet Revolver and currently loves Slash and Miles Kennedy. Just because Miles Kennedy, who is incredible, brilliant vocalist, because Scott is dead, and because of Slash and Duff, and because of even the reformation of Guns N' Roses, listen to Velvet Revolver. They made a absolutely brilliant debut album in Contraband, which is the best album that Slash has played on outside of Guns N' Roses. Obviously, the best album Slash has ever played on is Appetite for Destruction. The best album, in my opinion, outside of Guns N' Roses that he's ever played on, and the biggest selling, a Grammy-winning. Well, actually, will Sliver, the lead single, which is Danger personified. Look at the video. Weiland wearing his silver trousers, you know, and the verse, I just think that Velvet Revolver had the potential to have been like I said, the rock bands from our childhood, which got hard rock big again, were The Darkness, Buck Cherry, and Velvet Revolver. And Velvet Revolver, first album, got so big that they ended up appearing on Live 8 with the likes of Madonna and stuff. They ended up doing a song which was Tears in Heaven with the likes of Elton John, Rod Stewart, Steven Tyler, and so you can tell that at the time Velvet Revolver were mainstream. They were a mainstream rock band who had hits in the chart, who were, you know, like I said, winning Grammys, and they were on magazine covers. And I'm not just on about rock, I'm on about music magazines, because these guys are here to say rock and roll. And the first album was so good, it surprised people, because not many people were expecting the record to be as good as it was. And it was probably the second biggest selling album of 2004 in hard rock, outside of American Idiot by Green Day. Second album came around, and also they managed to contain him, because the risks that Slash and Duff and Matt had were, this guy's a heroin addict. They helped him kick it. Obviously Scott and the band didn't totally kick drugs, because at the time Duff and Slash were still drinking, you know. Like, they're clean now, but at the time they were still... But then, go
on.
No, sorry, man, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, and all it took was Slash's mum dying of lung cancer, I think it was, for making him give up smoking.
Oh, yeah, Slash, Slash, luckily, gave up drinking and smoking. Scott, on the other hand, didn't. And when the second album, Libertad, Velvet Revolver, another great album, Scott in the studio said, who are we going to produce this album? Brendan O'Brien. He produced all of my Stone Temple Pilots albums. So, and then Scott basically was telling everyone what to do. Scott was like, before it was a combined thing, but now Scott was like, do that, and it's like, we're a band here, man. And then they lost him. on that tour, the Libertad tour, was a disaster. On stage they were great, but they lost the man because he just went back into his old ways.
Yeah.
And then when that happened, when a whole tour got cancelled of New Zealand, Australia, and Scott Weiland was doing an Axl Rose. Scott became Axl Rose. He was 2 hours late on stage, and there was all that, plus the drugs, plus the, where's Scott, where is he? You know, and it became that, and it was like Slash and Duff became two of the most unlucky guys to have dealt with two really difficult figures. So essentially what Scott became to the STP guys, he became to the Guns N' Roses guys. Yeah. And they were like, we never want to work with this guy again because he is just as difficult as Axl. And because of his history of drug abuse, which he was back into drugs, Slash said, I never want to work with him again. Mm-hmm. And it's such a shame because, like Howard Stern, do you know of Howard Stern?
Yeah, of course I know of Howard Stern.
Yeah, and Howard Stern said in the interview that he had with Scott Weiland in 2011 to release his book, Not Dead and Not For Sale. Yeah. Now, ironically titled, but obviously the book came out before his death. He said, your bandmates must get really frustrated with you. You sing like an angel. You're one of the greatest rock singers of all time. But everyone gets so frustrated with you because of the fact that you will never learn. And even though you keep saying you will behave and you will, kick all your demons, it never happened. Scott is a hypocrite. He said, I'm 15 years clean. He wasn't because he OD'd and died. And, some were surprised and some weren't. The tributes were fitting. And the other thing was, you could call Scott Weiland a cool guy. Some people met him and thought, what a good guy. Some people met him and thought, what a dick, what an arsehole. Yeah. Ego-driven, diva. Yeah. But however, he was right for Velvet Revolver was because of the danger. Yeah. And the unpredictability in the end. But unfortunately, as the ageing members of Guns N' Roses, it was getting too much for them. And, all I can say is I've got majority of Scott's music. All of it is absolutely brilliant. If you like any kind of rock music, go and listen to Scott Weiland. Matt, I've done a lot of tour. He's a hero of mine. Yeah. I occasionally dress like him. I know this isn't the coolest thing in the world, but I'm doing a tribute to him on stage at Winchester University's Got Talent. I'm doing, how people go on these shows and they do a tribute to Freddie Mercury's and Michael Jackson's. I'm doing one to Scott Weiland, and half the audience is not going to know who I am. I'm not going to give a fuck. I'm going to be on stage with my megaphone, paying tribute.
Yeah, they're probably just going to say, on all of that, this guy's clearly a great rock star. They're not going to realise that you are actually doing an impersonation or a send-up, shall we say, to Scott Weiland. And that's the sad thing about it, because our gen just doesn't understand. We've talked about this before. We are in the right sort of setting as a city for rock music to have a rock society at the uni, but the uni is filled with people that just don't get the gist of where they are.
That's it. And another thing that I'm going to be doing tonight is, I know it's only karaoke, but we like the County Arms. I'm going to be singing Ace of Spades in dedication to Lemmy. Hopefully they've got it, because if they don't, that'll be ridiculous. But their book is a bit ridiculous.
And I'm going to be spending this evening doing my work whilst binging a lot of every artist that we've discussed so far.
Yes, that's it. And the other thing is, the reason why I'm doing a tribute to Scott rather than Lemmy, because I would love to do a tribute to Lemmy at Winchester Uni's Got Talent, but the reason why I'm not is because my vocal range is more fitted to Scott. I look more like Scott, and also even though I love Motorhead, I prefer Scott's music, but nonetheless. Oh yeah, another thing, I saw Motorhead 8 times, I saw Scott Weiland once. Unfortunately, I never got to see Velvet Revolver or Stone Temple Pilots, which I am sad about. In a way, kind of like Matt is sad that he'll never see Motorhead, I'll never see Stone Temple Pilots, I'll never see Velvet Revolver. But at the end of the day, I got to see him in a small venue where I actually met the guy, and it's fitting, that sums up Scott Weiland. He was a great performer that night, I've met the guy, but the way he behaved and the way he refused to have a photo with a big fan of his just sums him up in a heartbeat. And even the tributes, there was lots of tributes flooding through for Scott, and from rock stars all over. And Slash and Miles Kennedy played Sucker Train Blues. Yeah. Do you want to say a bit about that song?
Yeah, basically, Sucker Train Blues, amongst the many other things that I've heard from, like, Scott Weiland's thing recently. Like, I've been looking up a lot of his best, stuff from Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver. You actually gave me a compilation and his last ever album that he released. And, yeah, Sucker Train Blues really just has the right blend of everything that I love about the rock spectrum. It really is a bluesy vibe, but it's really fast-paced. Like, you'd expect, something like a very soft version. I mean, it's got the pace and the tenacity of a Motorhead track. It's got the sheer prowess of 1-2, but it's got the classic bluesy vibe and the rock and roll feel at its very core of, 1955 and then the pre-rock era with blues in general. It is essentially the rock spectrum personified. It's just got a very funky way of actually getting the lyrics across. He sings faster and more, rapidly than Steven Tyler did on Walk This Way.
Yeah, he did.
And yeah, that means that he essentially goes right into performance poetry as much as he does singing. He essentially does, a blend of what Johnny Cash does for all his songs and what Steven Tyler did for that, and he does it better than both of them.
Yeah, that's it, and that shows the talent of Weiland. One other thing, I'm glad you mentioned that, because otherwise I wouldn't have remembered what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
Download 2010, one of the best music lineups I've ever seen. On the Sunday, the headliners were Aerosmith, you've just mentioned Steven Tyler. The sub-headliners were Stone Temple Pilots, they're gone.
Yeah.
The band below them were Motorhead, they're now gone. And it's just... it's a shame that you've got the top three, and now two of them are gone.
Yeah.
And that shows you what I'm saying about the current breed. Bands are going to be dropping, and it's not necessarily going to be deaths, it's going to be retirements as well. And for me, because you put that status that, another thing which is so sad about grunge music in the 90s, you can tell had a load of drugs, because 5 singers, Kurt Cobain, Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell, Lane Staley, Scott Weiland, 3 of them are dead.
Yeah.
And one of them committed suicide, and the other 2 died of overdoses. Lane Staley died of a heroin overdose, and Scott Weiland died of an overdose combined of cocaine, MDMA, and I think it was alcohol or even ecstasy. It was a combination of all of those things where he was just still, as the band said. And a few people said, Scott shouldn't be out on the road. But unfortunately, there's no other way he's going to make money, because if Scott retired from music and got a stable job, I don't know if anyone can trust him to even show up on time and stuff, because he was very much his own man. And Scott Weiland's a big rock star. In his later days, he wasn't playing big venues. Even Chris Cornell and Eddie Vedder played big venues solo. Scott Weiland is basically just as famous as both of them. The only reason why Scott doesn't play big venues is because so many fans have just given up on him.
Yeah.
And I know, a lot of fans given up on Axl Rose as well, but the difference is Guns N' Roses are so megastar stadium big that we'll go on to this topic in 5 minutes of Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
But with Scott, because of cancellations, frustrating bandmates, not appearing in cities, cancellations, and just, in general, just pissing everyone off. That's why no one wanted to come out and see him. People obviously did. You got the big fans of rock music. Like I said, when I saw him at the garage, he was awesome. He sounded pretty good. He was performing songs. He was doing the megaphone. He was doing the dance moves, and he was actually on time. He was on time, which was good. And he gave his fans his money's worth. And there was one other thing I was going to add, and that was when he died, his ex-wife Mary, who Scott's got 2 kids. He had them. Scott's been married 3 times, divorced twice. Obviously, his current wife's devastated, but his former wife, who he got divorced to in about 2008, 2009, Scott had 2 kids and he had them both with her. Yeah. She said, "Thank you for the tributes. Remember his music." She said, but she goes, "Just remember, guys, the guy was a bit of an arsehole. He wasn't a good husband. He wasn't a good father. He rarely saw his kids. He was always on the road. He didn't show up to like school plays and stuff like that. And, he just, eventually, he was just a forgotten man. He was lost." Yeah. And he gave up on, bandmates gave up on him. He gave up on his bands. And he didn't, he might have seemed a frustrated figure being fired, but he said he had such a big ego. And the good thing is about him, he was a productive guy. He didn't spend 2 years off of a band. He went straight from Stone Temple Pilots to Velvet Revolver, back to Stone Temple Pilots, as well as a couple of albums, then to his new project. So it's not like he sat back. So Scott had the same working kind of productive state that Lemmy had. They were rock stars who didn't know any better than to tour, record music, and be on the road. And So yeah, Scott, I reckon if he stayed alive would have made great music. If he stayed alive, I couldn't see a Velvet Revolver reunion ever happening. Could I see a Stone Temple Pilots one? Yes. But Scott's vocals were not as good as they were back in the early days, and that is because of him not looking after himself.
Yeah.
You need to go to the gym, you need to cut down on abuse, and Scott, unfortunately, like how students here at uni end up struggling if they get too addicted to alcohol and end up being... Scott was kind of like that, but Scott, though, people were paying money to go and see him. Scott still took drugs and drank alcohol. Yeah. So eventually Scott was going on stage unfit, which obviously... And so was Lemmy, in fairness. Lemmy wasn't exactly fit either.
Yeah, no, but Lemmy, consistently throughout his life, we did actually get to see, for the majority of his career, he was, along with Motorhead in general, all reliable. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Motorhead were all reliable. The difference really between Scott and Lemmy is that Scott actually had the worst of it catch up with him. In many ways, I mean, there are younger guys that have died just as bad. They've died just as bad, much younger than Scott, but Scott hit it so hard that he really did set, I think, a new standard for, drugs aren't cool. Look what they did. They destroyed all of your cool factor.
That's it, yeah, and the good thing is, like I said, Scott Weiland and Lemmy, we can look back on their lives and listen to the great music, and there is probably unreleased music from both of them that we can look forward to listening to in the future.
Yeah.
And that's it, and at the end of the day, both these guys have sold records to the extent of both are very famous. I would say in the US, Scott is probably more well known than Lemmy, but Lemmy is more well known in the UK. Lemmy is more important to the history of music. Yeah. Scott was just a guy who sang for two of the biggest bands of their eras and was a chameleon. But, and it's not even just that. I remember actually Scott has performed on national TV with who's Cyndi Lauper, which is really awesome. And not even just that. Stone Temple Pilots toured with the Rolling Stones, they toured with Aerosmith, they toured with Megadeth. And this was when they were opening acts, before they became big enough to be a headliner. Exactly. And Scott Weiland, if people haven't heard of him or haven't heard his music and they want to know about how famous that guy is, he has sang on 2 #1 albums in the US with 2 different bands from 2 different decades. Yeah. He's also won Grammys with 2 different bands in 2 different decades. Yeah. And like I said, played at Live 8 and... was a very big rock star. And like Lemmy and Scott, they were presences. When they were in a room, you felt a presence. Yeah. You felt a bit of attitude, a bit of ego. You felt... Yeah. And this is just me... I know they're very different, but this is just me narrowing the comparisons down between both those guys. Yeah. They were 20th century rock singers who sold records, who had big fan bases. Rock music that sounds like rock music, meaning stripped down, it is what it is. 3.5-minute hit songs, Stone Temple Pilots, Motorhead. I'll tell you what, the most frustrating thing about Stone Temple Pilots, if you're a UK fan, is they didn't tour here enough. Yeah. They played, I know Velvet Revolver happened, but Stone Temple Pilots played 1 show in London and 1 show at Download in about a decade. Yeah. And that, I know Velvet were regulars to the UK when they happened, but even in the 90s, STP were a big band in the UK. They had some hits in the chart, they had some albums that sold, but they were never #1 in the chart like they were in the US, and the big reason is because they just didn't tour. If bands don't come to a country, they won't sell as many records as if they do. Yeah. And as big as Kiss and Aerosmith are, 2 of the biggest bands ever in the history of rock music, the reason why both broke in the 80s in the UK, not the 70s. And do you know why? Because in the 70s, both only played once. Yeah. Kiss played in 76, and so did Aerosmith. Both did UK tours or Hammersmith side shows, and that was it. Yeah. And around that time, they were releasing great singles and great albums, but they just weren't playing in the UK. When they eventually came over to the UK, they were arena bands, and that was because of their height of popularity. Going on to that. But,
yeah, and I'll just pretty much end up my bit here by saying, essentially with these 2 guys, you had Lemmy, essentially you have Darth Vader, and then you had Scott Weiland, who was Anakin Skywalker, pre-Darth Vader. You had 2 guys that really did, eventually they had to draw an end, but it was sad how one of them ended. And it was probably tragic, much more tragic, just for the sheer way how he kind of led himself into his own grave. But remember them, fondly for what they've done that was good for everything in what Scott ended up giving out. Don't, take anything so harshly from his personal life that you wouldn't take good influence where you can learn a thing or two. Lemmy definitely didn't have that problem at all. He was a very respected guy for obvious reasons, but yeah, still, he would advise you, say, he doesn't want to advertise all of his wrongdoings for the right reasons. He didn't want, people to just advertise the life about mistakes that he made and his mates made back when they were kids. Remember the music, remember them fondly. Remember, they will, excuse me, they will always be in our hearts for what we have received from them.
Cherish the memories.
Yeah, cherish the memories. Because you never know, ever, if you'll ever get experiences like that from that many other artists.
I just want to finish as well by saying that about the other thing which is really strange, especially in my life, is obviously a lot of sad things have happened in 2015. The Paris attacks, bombing Syria, the deaths of several, and there's a guy who used to serve me in my pub, the Firehouse, who died recently. So what I mean is, in the space of a short period of time in my life, as an adult anyway, because obviously you can't compare with 9/11 or anything like that, but death has, in the end of 2015, has happened so much. And what's really strange is how me and you mentioned about Lemmy not having long left in the last episode. Okay, I know it's not necessarily fate, but I met Scott Weiland 3 months before his death, and as you know, I have an image of him with Iggy Pop and Eddie Vedder on my door, don't I?
I know.
And I've had that up since about a week when I moved into halls, and then I wrote a rest in peace message because I thought, how weird's that? I've got 3 living rock stars on my door that I've chosen because I want to choose them. It's not a magazine, it's this thing I printed. And then one of them died about a month later, which is weird, man. I woke up, because I remember when Scott died, I actually remember we were in script writing, because I woke up to look at the Reading Festival announcement. I turned my laptop on, this was like 8:30 in the morning, and it came through that Scott Weiland had died, and I was like, shocked. And I remember coming into script writing and telling you
that was the first thing you ever said to me that day.
Yeah, I was just like, what, like...
Scott Weiland died.
Yeah, and it was... And I remember looking at the Reading announcement, and I was like, I don't even fucking care, one of my heroes is dead. And then obviously Lemmy coming 3 weeks later, and it was just like, no...
And I was like, I went completely faux catatonic that day. I couldn't move properly from my bed for about 7 hours.
By the way, this message as well, I'm going to finish actually, or we're going to finish, because I'm sure Matt will get involved with backing me up on this as well, is, okay, me and Matt were not friends, or, we didn't personally know Scott Weiland and Lemmy. However, when you have heroes that get you through your day-to-day lives, who have been a big part of your life longer than you've known certain people, there may be people listening to this podcast who say, fair play, you guys are paying a tribute. You guys were sad when they died, but you didn't personally know them. It's much worse when you know. We know it's worse when you physically know someone who died. However, when you have heroes that mean something to you, when they die, it is really sad. The people out there who don't have heroes, we're not saying you're missing out or anything, but having heroes is a great thing in life, because that means that you will forever buy the records or buy the films or buy the books, or if you have an author who's a hero, if you have a rock star, if you have any kind of heroes, a writer, a rock star, an actor, who has a politician even, someone who runs a company, if you have a hero and you find out they die and you've known, let's just say, I've been a fan of Scott's and Lemmy's for a decade. So I was very sad when they both died, and that's why we're doing this, isn't it, Matt?
Exactly.
And, we don't want heroes to die. It will happen in the future. We will try and pay tributes, even on this podcast,
Yeah, and despite, it always being worse in many ways when you physically do know the person. I mean, I've actually met James Masters. I can't actually imagine, life without my favourite actor and musician, point blank. James Masters is just my flat-out hero, and it will be a difficult thing because at the end of the day, their work as artists, they take from aspects of their own lives to try and reach out to people.
That's it. And I think for me, I know it's I shouldn't be talking about potential, but I reckon the day Springsteen goes would be horrible.
That would be probably the worst thing that could happen
Yeah.
since the day we found out Lemmy died.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, moving on to a more positive thing. Some people may think it's negative. We'll close out. GNR, yeah. Guns N' Roses, a band that are one of the greatest bands of all time, made the biggest selling debut album of all time, Appetite for Destruction. They're so big that girls who haven't even listened to them before buy their shirts in Primark.
Yes.
They're also a band who people are stupid enough to go and see with Axl be 2 hours late at the O2 Arena and not know that the guy with the top hat won't be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Guns N' Roses reunion is, aside to 2016, I'm a fan, I want it to happen. I put statuses on Facebook, I want the reunion to happen, I want the original lineup, I want Axl to be on time, and I want them to make new music, I want the tour to be a success, and I want Guns N' Roses as Guns N' Roses to be a triumphant reunion which will introduce the next generation to hard rock music.
Yeah, same here. Like, essentially, also, I don't really understand really how they all have their appeal, but somehow, I meant to say, sorry, my tongue gets caught when I get excited, but yeah, this is a topic worth getting excited about, because if you think about it, Guns N' Roses, they have an appeal that just is, I don't know, maybe it's the image of the guys, but they just seem to have some sort of image that musically it somewhat is mirrored in their physicality. Duff McKagan, Axl Rose, and Slash, none of them were ever considered bad-looking lads back in the day, but, you know, they didn't look, you know, like anything other than, to us guys, maybe your typical rock stars. They looked essentially, though, like the type of rock stars that we definitely needed. Appetite for Destruction, that was definitely one of the biggest albums in history. Definitely the biggest debut album in history.
Yeah.
And in terms of sheer artistry, I think the only album that matches it on a rock spectrum would be Led Zeppelin's Fourth, and even then you have to define it in a very different way.
That's it, and obviously with this reunion, I'm not going to go into detail too much here, but the reason why I feel like I know my stuff is because I listen to Eddie Trunk's radio show, and he's a music journalist who gets people on his show. And he said last year, Axl and Slash have made up, a reunion is strongly rumoured. And even though for years, friends, people you know, journalists have said there's going to be a Guns N' Roses potentially next year, you're just like, no, it's just not going to happen. And I said in language writing reading class, you've heard it from me first class, you're Guns N' Roses fans, they're getting back together next year, and everyone in the class laughed at me. And I then said, go ahead and laugh. They're getting back together, and you've heard it from me first. I do the research, I know my stuff, you guys don't really... Well, they do obviously want a reunion, these guys, but they don't know the stuff or know the people that I do. And, all I can say is that it's been out of the people in my life, there's a dividing opinion. I've got some friends who aren't excited because they say it was a moment in time, Axl can't sing anymore, Axl will fuck it up. And we like Slash, we like Duff, we like some people, and like there's also a big argument about who's going to be in the band, because apparently Matt Sorum, from what I've read so far, is nothing to do with the reunion. Apparently Matt Sorum is a no, from what I know so far.
And I don't even understand why, you know, people are getting so uptight about whether or not it should be. I mean, I don't know if uptight's even the word, but let's just say the controversy is there of whether or not Matt should be there or Matt shouldn't be there, or just is he going to be there or not?
Well, the thing is that he wasn't as good as Matt Sorum was, because obviously he was Use Your Illusion albums, he did Velvet Revolver as well. The original Guns N' Roses drummer is Steven Adler. Now I've listened to Steven Adler do an interview on Eddie Trunk's radio show. Steven Adler wants to be in the reunion just as much as anyone, and he's getting excited, but unfortunately, he said, I don't think I'm going to be in it because I've had no phone call and no one thinks I'm cool and no one thinks I'm good enough when I am. And unfortunately, because of Stephen's problems in his life with his cocaine addictions and his unreliability over the years, But Stephen now at his older age, from what I gather, seems to have really got clean, got sober, and seems to be dedicated and committed. Yeah. All they need to do is rehearse with him. But because Axl Rose is such a big rock star, he won't even speak to him, let alone play with him.
Yeah.
So apparently, from what I've read, their current drummer, I'm so sorry, it's really unprofessional. I can't remember Guns N' Roses' current drummer's name. His name's like Richard Fortus or something like that.
But either way, like, no one even thinks about their current lineup anyway, because we see... I mean, when we think of a Guns N' Roses reunion, the way it's advertised, like, you and I have to admit, we don't even think that since the original band broke apart, we don't feel that Guns N' Roses were the band that released Chinese Democracy. We just consider that, in many ways, to be an Axl Rose solo.
No, totally. And can I tell you this? It's not a bad record.
Yeah.
For me, it's not a Guns N' Roses record because there's no Slash, there's no Dove, there's no Izzy Stradlin, there's no Stephen Adler or Matt Sorum on drums.
Yeah.
To us, the day that Slash and Duff left, because Izzy left in 91, but people didn't give up on Guns because they still had a great tour, they still had a great band.
Yeah.
But when key members leave, and the only guy who's left is the guy who fucked it all up in the first place, and also in like 1990 or 91, Axl Rose made the other members give the rights Guns N' Roses to him, why would you do that when you're just a part of it as the other four?
Yeah, and actually, I don't understand, what was the reason for them just eventually giving up the rights? Was it they just couldn't be asked to argue anymore?
I can't even remember, to be honest, mate.
Yeah, to be honest, that would not surprise me.
But it it may even have been the unpredictability of things going wrong, because Duff said the band were at their best in the early days, the pre-Appetite, obviously the Lies and Patience era as well. But they said once Use Your Illusion came out, things did start falling apart because Matt Sorum was a frustrated drummer for two reasons. Number one, everyone saw him as the replacement. And the second reason was because he expected to be in the Appetite band. Yeah. As soon as he joined, it was piano, and stuff, and big ballads. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with power ballads. Matt Sorum played on Fall to Pieces, which is a Velvet Revolver, and Slash Classic, which is very much sounds like Guns N' Roses. But Matt Sorum expected punky, fast-driven, Appetite, dangerous, and Use Your Illusions are great records, but they're more known as the epic scale. And, okay, I know around that era, power ballads were really big. Like Bon Jovi had Bed of Roses, and you had Scorpions with Wind of Change, and you had Skid Row with Wasted Time.
You had the other Scorpions classic, which is Send Me an Angel.
Yes, you had that great song. Yeah. You had Heart with all their, All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You. And it was a very ballad-driven industry. Def Leppard had When Love and Hate Collide. It's another one. And at the time, Axl saw the piano-driven side of November Rain is something that Axl wanted. Yeah. Because Axl's hero was Elton John. Yeah. And for that reason, that the piano and the ballads and also the orchestra, because there was an orchestra on the albums. There were danger elements. You Could Be Mine, Terminator 2, badass song. Get 'Em in the Ring, that was a good song.
Yeah.
But mostly, though, Don't Cries and Estranged. Estranged was a big November Rain 10-minute ballad. Exactly. That was another one. You also had the cover of Knocking on Heaven's Door. That was a power ballad. Yeah. The cover of Live and Let Die. That wasn't necessarily a ballad, but...
No, it was pretty much... that James Bond theme, which Paul McCartney wrote, it was essentially, I think, made to capture the essence of, have you seen Live and Let Die?
I have, yep.
Yeah, like the opening bit where, one of the agents gets killed in New Orleans and they have that jazz funeral that's set as a cover-up to hide away his body. Mm-hmm. Well, imagine that same sort of inspiration. That's essentially what Paul McCartney seems to have taken for that thing. Dreary 1 minute, and then they amp it up with a proper jazz vibe the next. And with Guns N' Roses, that actually just seems to suit the style because, Axl's vocal range is just designed for that sort of template.
That's it.
Yeah.
Another thing which ended up breaking the band up was, I don't know if you ever read or heard about this, Matt, but it was they did a co-headline tour in 91 or 92 with Metallica. And that was the same tour when James Hetfield burnt his arm accidentally on a magnesium pyro accident
I didn't see this, no.
Yeah, when they played Fade to Black. So essentially, Metallica had to cut their set short for a lot of high-paying young customers. Yeah. And so how can this happen? Tragedy. But Guns N' Roses can still play. Hetfield's been taken to the hospital. Yeah. Lars said we'll come back and play here in the next couple of months. Now Guns N' Roses are on next. Axl can be the hero of the day. And Axl then, they go on stage, not early, they went on stage, and then after about, I think it was like 7 or 8 songs, Axl chucked his microphone down, something wasn't to his liking, and then he refused to go back on stage. Yeah. And you're thinking, and then the fans got so pissed off, they run a riot and started smashing up buildings and cop cars. And
so basically they did essentially, what France ended up having a bunch of its youths and yobs doing back in the 2006 World Cup final, when they lost to Italy.
Yes, and the 2011 London riots.
Yeah.
That happened. So, they were just... So, okay, tragedy happens. James Hetfield, arms gets burned.
That's
magnesium...
not his fault.
No, not his fault, but it's not his fault. Then Axl and Guns N' Roses can save the day, but Axl, just through Axl, cuts his set short on his own because he's not happy. He's sitting backstage. Jason Newsted, Metallica bassist at the time, said to him, "Hey man, what's going on? Can't you go?" He goes, "My throat's fucked." He's smoking and drinking. He's smoking cigarettes and drinking a beer or something. And he's like, if your throat's bad, you probably shouldn't be drinking and smoking.
Oh, please tell me that footage is archived somewhere.
Okay, no, the footage of the conversation isn't there, but Jason Newsted talking about it, the footage is around.
That footage alone will do me just fine. I need to make a topic about, hypocrisy that I need to put out there.
The thing is, the other interesting thing is, that is Axl in the early 90s, and even, I'll go on to this in a sec, but over the years he didn't change, he got worse, because he then replaced the Guns N' Roses members with all new members, and instead of calling the band a new name, or even calling it Axl Rosen or something, he just called it Guns N' Roses or GNR. They got a new logo, which was good, but they had new members with the likes of Buckethead, and you had DJ Asper, you had the Replacements bass player, Tommy Stinson, you had, who was the other guy you had who quit? Ron Bumblefoot. Yeah. You had them as well. By the way, last year Bumblefoot and DJ Asper quit. It made you wonder, and now we know why they quit, because they got replaced by Slash and, Duff,
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when we think about, everything that Axl Rose has done, I am surprised. I think this is actually why a lot of people were laughing when you said that's the class, because it's kind of clear. Axl would be impossible for that many people to work with. But I think he must be finally just willing. He must be so low at some point in his career that he has now just decided, to just say, I really need to swallow my pride. I've fucked up. I have fucked up well and truly fucking high. And, Slash would probably be going back to his roots of, the cause, thinking about it, and then going back to his British roots, he'd be like, "You're bloody well right you have been, mate."
That's it. And it makes you wonder, with this reunion happening, has Axl changed? Because he must have done something, because the thing is, I never thought of Slash and Duff, because the reason why I'm only mentioning Slash and Duff at the moment is because they're the only ones, because what's today's date, Matt?
Today's date is the 10th of Jan.
Okay, 10th of Jan we're recording this, and we're only giving you the information that is clear at the moment. Yeah. So far, all we know is it's Axl Rose, Slash and Duff. The other back two are unclear, as is Dizzy Reed on keyboards. Yeah. Potentially, I reckon he will be, because he's him and Axl seem to love each other. By the way, just to make this clear, if anyone doesn't know, Dizzy Reed joined the band in 1990 on keyboards, because obviously the piano was a big part of the Use Your Illusion albums, and he never got fired or never quit. When Gilby Clarke, who replaced Izzy Stradlin, I think got fired. But you'd think to yourself, surely Axl has done something or changed to make... Because, Slash and Duff never seem like guys who are in it for the money, do they? Yeah. Because Duff just seems like a nice guy. Because you remember I showed you the documentary, The Rise of Velvet Revolver, and the way that Duff helped Scott Weiland kick heroin through martial arts, and the way how Duff and Steve and Matt Sorum had an argument about Duff was like, I'm a level-headed guy, and Matt that day was being a bit of an arsehole. But
I mean, as much as I really do hate to say it, Matt was actually, kind of being an arsehole. In ways that really did shock me, because like the main reason you showed me that documentary, I think, was to show that while Matt is actually, in general, always portraying himself as quite a nice lad, he does have a bit of a, he does have an outspoken nature that when pushed too far, he will get a bit prissy.
Yeah, that's it. And they don't seem like, Duff seems like your nice guy. He releases books, he's famous, he's a good-looking guy, he's a good bass player.
Yeah.
And
he looks just like an LA cool guy.
Yeah, he's not actually from LA, he's from Seattle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
well, that explains it. He looks like, essentially everything a cool guy needs to be.
That's
and
it.
He's from that rock culture up north.
Also, his current band, by the way, because obviously Duff is in Duff McKagan's Loaded, he was in Velvet Revolver, he was also in a band, Walking Papers, where his name isn't even mentioned. The reason why Slash's Snake Pit and Duff McKagan's Loaded had their names pumped in was to sell tickets.
Yeah.
That's record companies do that. With Walking Papers, people go see this band and they're like, that's Duff McKagan on bass.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And I haven't listened to Walking Papers properly, so I won't go into detail about their music. But the other interesting thing is with the Guns is who will be at the back, because from what I've read so far, it seems like Guns N' Roses' current drummer has got the gig, which makes you think that Matt Sorum is a no, and Steven Adler was a no, but apparently from what I've read, he now may be making a guest appearance for a couple of songs, which would be a bit weird. I've never seen a drummer come on stage and play for 2 songs a show.
Yeah.
I've never seen that. I've seen people come on stage like a special... Like, I remember when I saw Ugly Kid Joe supporting Alice Cooper, the Skin Dread drummer played on 2 songs, but I've never seen, like, a classic member... Not on drums, anyway. I've seen guitar players, but never a drummer. I've never seen a drummer do that, so that would be really weird, in my opinion, anyway. And so that's unclear. Apparently, Dave Kushner, the Velvet Revolver guitarist, might be getting a gig, but I think that would be unlikely. Izzy Stradlin apparently is now back in the mould again, even though he was previously ruled out. Because, Izzy Stradlin had the opportunity to be in Velvet Revolver with the other guys. He didn't want to be a part of it, but he made guest appearances on stage with Velvet Revolver. And also, after that, he made guest appearances on stage with Axl, which slightly made you think maybe they've made up. But Izzy has always been a quiet, shy, independent guy who doesn't want his name in the headlines.
Aye.
And that is why he thinks Guns N' Roses reunion, no. But maybe a couple of shows I'll come on stage.
Yeah.
Matt Sorum, I think, probably would like to be in the reunion, but I don't think him and Axl get along. Maybe they would make up for this reunion the way that Axl... Because Duff McKagan made up with Slash last year. Duff McKagan played with Guns N' Roses for a tour on bass, and Slash made... We knew that as soon as Slash and Axl had made up, the reunion was bound to happen at some point.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be as soon as it was,
Yeah.
because all we know so far is they're headlining Coachella.
Yeah.
That's their only confirmed show.
Yeah.
They have been rumoured to headline Glastonbury, BST Hyde Park, Reading and Leeds, the Isle of Wight Festival, possibly Wembley Stadium, the Olympic Stadium.
Yeah.
Rumours have been swirling everywhere. And I'll tell you this, man, I'm not going to go into Download too much now, but if those festivals get Guns N' Roses, or one of them does, Andy Copping from Download will be kicking himself.
Yeah, Andy Coffey would actually just be over the moon about that sort of stuff. And also, if Guns N' Roses managed to get back, together, I mean, I can't obviously afford to go to too many more than what I call the priority events of the year, but the Isle of Wight, I had the chance to go there many years ago, didn't get to go in the end because, well, many different things. I'm kind of glad I didn't go because that was the year they got flooded.
Yep, I went that year. Springsteen, Tom Petty, Pearl Jam.
Yeah, don't rub it in my face, Mush.
No, that's alright, dude.
But anyway, basically, this is the thing. I want to see Guns N' Roses. If they perform at the Isle of Wight, I can't not go. It would be like, it doesn't matter to me whether they perform in Winchester or anywhere else within Hampshire's general circumference. The Isle of Wight It's basically an extension of Hampshire. I'm a proud Hampshire man. I'm not going to jump, back up and then say, actually, I can't go if they're that close to me.
However, Matt, you may not know this, Isle of Wight Festival and Download Festival clash. Which means that if you go to Isle of Wight just for Guns N' Roses, you will miss Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I know. Basically, I'm saying this, in any other situation.
Yeah.
I'm saying this as Guns N' Roses. If they can come to any event, I will go. If they can only come to the Isle of Wight, that would mean I would have, a bit of a clash of priorities. But given the fact I'm already pretty much prepped up for the Download Fest this year, I think it's fairly safe to say that that's not going to change anytime soon.
No.
But in general, you get what I mean. Yep. And also, on this basis, can we round off this with a quick...
So I've got a few more things to add.
Well, yeah, I mean, go on, actually.
No, sorry, man, you carry on.
I was just going to finish my particular bit of this by saying, staples of their live set. What do you want in their catalogue of things that you want to hear if you get to see Guns N' Roses perform live?
Appetite. The best stuff of Use Your Illusions.
Yeah.
Chinese Democracy does not bother me, but I think Axl will because he's Axl and he loves that album. And when they toured the album, they played loads from it. Favourite album is Appetite. I'd like to hear Patience.
Yeah.
I would like to hear a song like Bad Obsession. Even, obviously, Mr. Brownstone. Even Rocket Queen. What else? Obviously... majority of Appetite. If they played Appetite in its entirety, that would be incredible. I couldn't see that happening, though.
Yeah.
The thing is, has Axl Rose got the range to sing? Well, you'd think so, because I know some people who have seen Guns N' Roses over the years have been really impressed, but I have refused to go see them because I want to get home on time.
Yeah.
If Guns N' Roses... Oh, yeah, and also, festival headline organisers don't want to book Guns N' Roses with that Chinese Democracy lineup because they're late. Reading and Leeds 2010, did you hear what happened? They got unplugged. Because they were late, and then they refused to leave the stage, and then people started throwing bottles and laughing at him.
Yeah.
And in 2006, Guns N' Roses were actually on time, but Andy Copping hasn't been interested in booking them since, though, because it's too... what's the word? It pulverises people.
Yeah.
That band... And I had some friends who got excited about them in 2012 at the O2, and I'm like, don't go, he'll be late. He was late.
Yeah. And actually, to be fair, if I can go and see GNR, I think, firstly, I need to be absolutely certain, and I think them actually just having a reunion in the first place, that is the thing that is going to give me some optimism for it. But without that optimism that they're actually going to be on time, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it depends where you are. If you're camping at a festival, if they're late, it's annoying, and it's unprofessional. Yeah. You'll just be like, oh well, what else will I be doing? If you need to get a train home, you're fucked.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, if I could go to a festival if I'm lucky, my rules are this: if you want me to camp, fine, but I prefer it if we did it at a quiet part of the area, and also, if we have the option of staying in a hotel, I'd rather stay in a hotel. Just to make it easier, because I know what it's like going off to different places, having to spend, either a really uncomfortable night, after something pretty big, no matter how big it is, no matter how great the whole thing is. I know exactly what would happen if GNR were late by 2 hours onto the stage, and I would just end up being so pissed I wouldn't bother that night. I have to make sure that, if my festival routine is planned out, it has to be so that I actually have to plan the idea for specific bands with specific reputations, because GNR, the fact that now they're actually getting back together means they're all confident that Axl isn't going to make a mess of everything. If he does, that is going to be the biggest letdown I think I'll have musically for many years to come.
Do you know what could happen?
What?
Axl, night one,
yeah,
could show up on stage late and then Slash says, I quit. That could happen. Because...
I don't really want to be there to see that.
No, of course you wouldn't. A good friend of mine who lives in Southampton, he knows this stuff. He would be great to have on this, maybe one weekend or something. But he said to me, he goes, two things. First thing is, if the original lineup, whatever lineup, is back and confirmed for festivals, both in the UK and whatever, don't believe a word until they appear. and they're on stage together.
Yeah.
Good point. That's a really good point. Everything could be book confirmed, and then it could all get scrapped. And this is why Axl Rose, I don't know if you read about this, Axl Rose last week was due to appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live to announce the reunion, and he pulled out like 2 days before. So he pulled out of essentially a gig, which is typical Axl Rose. If he does that for that, what makes you think he won't pull out of this?
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. Like, I mean, Axl is such a mercurial character. Like, essentially, he is an unlikable version of Mercutio from Romeo and Juliet, in the sense that he reacts to everything for the worst, and not in a likable way that advances the plot of everything. He holds everything back for everyone. And, yeah, like, I'm actually surprised he hasn't appeared on Jimmy Kimmel to read out tweets about him, to be honest, because have you seen those segments? Like, celebrities get, you know, a bunch of people trolling about them on Twitter. They come out, they read the tweets, and they respond to them in the most badass way. And, yeah, I am surprised that Axl hasn't chosen to just put his... I am genuinely surprised he hasn't actually put time aside in his life just for the sole privilege of about 10 seconds of doing that. Because that is probably the funniest thing that he can do. And it's probably the best way to probably keep everything calmed down with GNR, because... sorry about that. But yeah, GNR, they are, you know, thanks to Axl, they are subject to a lot of criticism just about their professionalism. None of that is fair, is it? If it's all blamed on one member. But
you would think, but
yeah.
The thing is that, you know, it's like everyone blames Axl.
Yeah.
Who else can you blame?
Yeah.
Like, I know apparently Axl once called Slash a cancer, and he also called, when Velvet Revolver got together, Axl was jealous of the attention.
Yeah.
And he called Scott Weiland a fraud, and then Scott then responded to Axl by saying he is a fat Botox wearing, wig wearing fuck, end quote. Yeah.
You know, that was only expected, wasn't it?
Oh, of course it was. And the interesting thing is because obviously at the moment Slash is touring with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. Really good band. They are professional. They are on time. Miles can sing Guns N' Roses songs better than Axl Rose. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame happened in 2012. Axl Rose did not show up to his own rock and roll induction. Billy Joe Armstrong mentioned his name. Booze flooded. Axl, Billy Joe then stopped that and said, "Remember, badass rock and roll legend," because he is.
Yeah.
You know, and then everyone quickly stopped.
Exactly. Like, I mean, show some respect at least for the artistry.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, it's just kind of what it is. Like, yeah, exactly as you say. Oh, sorry, my tongue keeps getting caught.
I was talking about Miles Kennedy.
Yeah, like Miles Kennedy. Like,
Can sing Guns N' Roses songs better than Axl.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, if people got rid of, you know, Axl...
You can't, though.
I know, it wouldn't be Guns N' Roses, because the Rose bit comes from him.
It's not just that. He is the man who sang those songs you want to hear.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And there are very few singers that can come in and do it. And there's always pessimism, say, about Brian Johnson replacing Bon Scott for AC/DC. But it worked. He was actually, in all honesty, my preferred of the two vocalists.
Yeah, that's it. And you can tell, though, that when Slash recruited Miles to be his frontman both on record and on tour, that he sounds so much like Axl when he sings in general, when he sings those songs, and the fact that he is a nice guy. Let's be honest, Slash recruited Miles because Axl Rose is a prick, Scott Weiland's a prick, both are late, both are divas, unpredictable, and so he recruited Miles Kennedy because...
He's basically got that Irish charm. Yeah,
and that's it. And the thing is, Alter Bridge, Slash and Miles Kennedy is going on hiatus for the moment, taking a break. Miles is getting involved in Alter Bridge, and where does that leave Slash? Boom, boom, you know, Guns N' Roses reunion. And at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Axl didn't show up, so they said, when we perform, Miles Kennedy, can you sing these songs for us?
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Izzy Stradlin also didn't show up to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and
Yeah.
that's because Izzy doesn't want the attention,
Yeah.
which makes you think he's going to have nothing to do with this reunion unless it's a couple of guest appearances.
Yeah, like why? Just out of interest, why is Izzy so shy? Is it something that just kind of caught on after the Appetite era, or was it something?
Yeah, I think it was that.
Yeah, because I mean, you can't really expect to just make it in that industry and then not expect, you know, you can expect the best, you can expect the worst, but don't be sad about the best. I mean, yeah, I can get why you may not want the attention to be making you develop a big ego, but we all know that of all of them, he's probably the least likely person to get an ego.
Yeah, you'd say so.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, another thing, you know, I was talking about my mate and his comments earlier on. The other thing he said was, this is another sad thing. There is a, I don't know, 15-year-old kid who's really into Guns N' Roses. Yeah. He then buys a ticket for the tour, hasn't seen them, you know, and then he gets disappointed. And he goes, there's going to be lots of that. Because this tour, rockers are going to want to go. Yeah. People who only like... There's people who may only like one or two songs who are going to want to go because it will fill stadiums. People who aren't rock fans are going to want to go to this reunion tour.
Yeah,
because the Guns N' Roses name alone is big enough, and with the classic lineup, if it happens, everyone is going to want to go.
I'm going to take my sister there, and she won't kick up a fuss. Like, Emma isn't really that fascinated by rock music. She likes some of it, but Guns N' Roses, she will want to go just because, you know, there's something to click with her.
Totally, and like I said, even there's people who don't like rock music who buy Ramones, Guns N' Roses, Rolling Stones, and Kiss shirts from Primark, who've never actually listened to the band. And like I said, Guns N' Roses with the 2 Hour Lates and Axl and his current band of clowns, or previously current, because obviously it's current now with Slash and with his old band of clowns, that's what I call them, because they're really good musicians. It's just the way how they're his puppets, which pisses me off.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are people, they can still fill 2 nights at the O2 and show up an hour and a half late each night and still fill both venues, because there are people out there who are clueless enough not to do the research, know the backstory, and they show up and they're like, why is he late? Or they come on stage, where's the guy with the top hat? There are people out there who seriously do that.
And there are people that actually still refer to him as the guy with the top hat.
Yeah, that's the thing. Guns N' Roses are that popular that you could... that this reunion tour, and I've had many discussions with people, if this reunion tour happens with the original 5, and it is a success, it will be the biggest reunion tour in music history. Some people might have just heard that and say, no, Alex, you're wrong. Okay, take that reunion tour, really big. Not big in America. Guns N' Roses wins. Spice Girls. Spice Girls reunion's pretty big. I know it's obviously manufactured and stuff. You know, it's girl band versus Guns N' Roses. I would say Guns N' Roses, in terms of music history, were more groundbreaking. Also, side projects. The Guns N' Roses side projects of Axl and his band of clowns, Slash's Snake Pit, Velvet Revolver, Duff McKagan's Loaded, Stephen Adler's Appetite, Matt's Walking Papers as well. I mentioned Snake Pit, didn't I? Slash and Miles Kennedy and Conspirators. What other side projects can you think Guns N' Roses related?
Aside from that, nothing immediately springs to mind, but I imagine, you know, if there is anything they would have done.
So all these side projects outside of Guns were successful. And also, for me, the reason why a Guns N' Roses reunion will beat a Led Zeppelin reunion is because the original lineup are all still alive.
Yeah, and it's a sad thing to have to admit, but, you know, without Bonzo, there's just no real feel that it is the same Zeppelin. I mean, Bonzo was the greatest drummer of all time. He was as much a staple of that band as, you know, it's the same reason why we'll never get a Beatles reunion, even if George Harrison was still alive. John Lennon, and, you know, if he or Paul McCartney had died, you know, and the others were still willing to perform, they would be, you know, essentially just making a fool of the memory of their mate.
That's it. And I also think that Guns N' Roses have more appeal to young people and even girls who shop in Primarks and stuff. And more appeal to them than Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. I seriously mean that. I reckon Sweet Child of Mine will more appeal to them than a whole lot of love will Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah, especially seeing as how a bunch of fans of Fergie would know that song from when she actually ended up covering it.
And Fergie has also sang on Slash's solo album called Beautiful Dangerous.
Yeah, and one thing I will say about Fergie, she has the right voice for that style. She's just doing the wrong music.
Yeah, that's it. You got it in a nutshell there, dude. But with the side projects alone, like Slash is now, I think, just as famous as Axl Rose. He is, because of Velvet Revolver got him mainstream performer, but they re-established him as a mainstream performer. But the image, he has played with Michael Jackson, he has played with B.B. King, he's played with Fergie, Adam Levine. These are people who are, you won't say as rock star, but Slash could play with any musician. He could do lead guitar for anyone because he's got the image, he's got the sound, he's got the versatile range of playing because he's that good, and he's played on many different styles of rock music.
Yeah, and actually, if you put him on the same stage as Eminem, and you know what Eminem is to rap fans, like, essentially, Slash would steal all the attention just from, say they can't get Marilyn Manson to do, a duet for that whole song they did, what was it called? It was something like, I am whatever you say. I can't remember the name.
No, but Marilyn Manson wasn't in that song.
Well, yeah,
he just got mentioned.
Yeah, he got mentioned.
The Way I Am.
Yeah, The Way I Am. But actually, there is a version of that which he was actually singing it with Eminem. And yeah, all attention would be on Slash and his guitar or his hat. And you all know how a good hat can draw attention, don't you?
Yep, off you, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, basically, Slash can perform with anyone, in a nutshell. You could put him up with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and, you'd pay more attention to him, or anyone else. I mean, the conductor, essentially, is generally the only other person you pay more attention to than some standout musician in a set piece. But Slash, you'll either be watching his hands move up the guitar, or you'll be looking at his top hat. Slash is that iconic that,
and
you'll just draw everyone.
The riffs, the solos.
Yeah.
And...
Remind me, he plays a Gibson Les Paul, is it?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And this reunion, I had a friend as well who said Pink Floyd reunion, hands down, beats the Guns N' Roses one. I said, Pink Floyd in music history are more important, they've sold more records, and they could play any stadium they want if they had Roger Waters as well as, who's the main front man? David Gilmour.
Yeah, David Gilmour.
If you had the classic, but still, when you think about, this isn't just rock, to rock fans, of course Pink Floyd would sell just as much as Guns, and of course it'd be just as big, but outside of rock fans, I reckon Guns N' Roses wins.
Yeah.
You were more likely going to hear a Guns N' Roses song on the X Factor, you're more than likely going to hear a Guns N' Roses song on the radio in general. I reckon you're more likely going to hear a Guns N' Roses song played in store, I don't know, supermarkets or, or even...
Yeah, and pretty much like Guns N' Roses essentially have, become the gateway for many other people into rock music, even if they haven't really gone all the way into the garden.
Well, it depends on generations, but I think in the 70s... Well, actually, this is Guns N' Roses' impact.
Yeah.
You know how grunge killed hair metal?
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses were the first band who was sort of hair metal to kill them. Because you had all these bands. I love hair metal. Don't get me wrong. I know it's good and bad. You can. This is another topic you could record a podcast on.
Yeah.
But with hair metal, you had Motley Crue's Rats. You had Poisons. You had Quiet Riot's Wasps. You had Bon Jovi and Def Leppard. You could say are hair metal bands, but obviously lasted beyond hair metal because of how their music changed and how popular those bands were. But still, them White Snakes. Who else? White Lion, Winger, Warrants.
Yeah.
Appetite for Destruction said, hang on a minute, what's all this sissy wussy pop bullshit? We're making a dangerous record which combines danger with hair metal, with hard rock, which is heavy but light. And a friend of mine once said Guns N' Roses took rock and roll from that era to its peak with that one album. He said there will never be a better sounding rock album from the 80s than Appetite for Destruction.
And I would imagine Joe Perry would actually agree with you, because he said that, in Rolling Stone's top 100 greatest artists of all time, when he was talking about GNR himself, They actually dug a little bit deeper into rock's roots, and you could even tell that they were quite obviously inspired by Aerosmith.
Yep, and do you know what happened in 1987?
They toured together.
Yep, and guess who? And don't get me wrong, Aerosmith's popularity got bigger after that, because you know how Aerosmith had the...
They had a hiatus of their popularity due to, well, the drugs and just general stuff.
Yes, but the album that got them fame... Okay, the Run DMC thing got them attention, but then the album that got them back was Permanent Vacation.
Yeah.
They toured Permanent Vacation in 87, 88 as the headliner, and their opening band was this new band called Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
And yeah, even though, okay, Aerosmith, it didn't do anything to affect their career, but for Guns, that tour, Guns N' Roses were the real headliner that tour, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like, essentially, they were opening up, but they were pretty much the main headline act in the eyes of the masses, and...
Attention, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you think about it, Guns N' Roses, you know, an appetite. I mean, I can still pick up, you know, everything that I love about the original Aerosmith albums, going all the way up to the Rocks era.
And Draw the Line.
Yeah, and Draw the Line too, but yeah. I mean, Draw the Line essentially is the main good song on the album. The rest of the album is somewhat shaky from what I can actually remember compared to it, but overall, yeah.
But anyway,
it was just like great stuff.
Yeah, man. Going back onto the topic of Guns N' Roses, I would love to see them open their reunion with Welcome to the Jungle, going into It's So Easy or Night Train. You asked me the question earlier, I'm going to ask you, what do you want to hear in the set?
Well, the one that really stands out for me, just because I love the way how the song actually remains peaceful and actually gets me through everything. It's like my meditation mantra. Aside from Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, Patience, and then obviously I want everything you can mention of Appetite for Destruction, just to give the kids something of an education, and everything else, you know, it's kind of second nature, but November Rain, they've got to do that if they can get the crew together for it. They've got to also, for me, like, something else I really want, Sweet Child O' Mine, Paradise City. I want everything that, you know, you would expect to get from the Guns N' Roses record collection that you've got, and I want the best bits, you know, just to kick everything off. I just want a great mix of all the best hits.
What about Chinese Democracy?
Chinese Democracy I actually haven't heard too much of in recent years, but the album, I'll admit, it was good, but I'd rather that they actually focus more on what it is that they've actually been missing out on.
Yeah,
or
totally.
taking a trip back in time and then...
Also, I don't want any side project songs. They won't. That would really surprise me, but I can't see them doing that.
I can't see them doing that either, and I wouldn't want to see them do it point blank.
No. Another thing, the reason why we want the original 5 is because Guns N' Roses reunion needs to be special. In 1996, Kiss got back together, 13 years without makeup, first time since 1980 with the original 4. The original 4, 16-year wait, back in makeup after 13, big stadium tour, and I think Kiss fans got what they were waiting for patiently and what they deserved, and that was a huge tour.
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses deserve, okay, it's not in our control, it's not in a lot of people's control, but I think the fans of Guns N' Roses deserve that lineup.
Yeah, they deserve that lineup. They deserve the best from all their best set lists, from their best concepts.
And they deserved value for money with Axl being on time and sounding good.
Yeah.
And if it goes according to plan, well, okay, what is according to plan in the head of Axl Rose?
Well, basically, don't even be 5 minutes late. I doubt they'll even allow him to be 2 minutes late. And if he comes on set, he can come on crying, begging for mercy, and it would be something that we can't picture Axl doing, but let's face it, if Axl did that, that would be a way of showing that he really is changing for the better.
Indeed. And do you know what I think? Okay, this may be one of the most cynical things I say on this podcast.
Tell me.
But if Izzy Stradlin, Matt Sorum, or Steven Adler isn't there, the other guys don't deserve to be playing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, they are part of the history of Guns, but they're not part of the reunion. It is a reunion.
Yeah.
Okay, it hasn't been billed as the reunion, but to the eyes of the masses, it is the reunion tour.
Yeah.
And those guys were part of Axl's puppets. They shouldn't be there. The other guys should be in the band. You know why? because they're still playing music and they're still alive.
Yeah, they're still alive, they're still playing music, and above all, they can still play as good as, I mean, obviously they've had a few ups and downs, but if they're really thinking about getting a reunion back together, optimism getting the better of me here, I know, but let's just say for the sake of argument, they actually are back to their peak, where they need to be, to get the reunion going.
And these questions will be answered in due time. I think it's such a weird one because it's already controversial in typical Guns N' Roses style, and it's cool. And the attention will be huge. I want the attention to be huge. Don't get me wrong. Like, I know on this podcast so far, me and Matt have mostly spoke about the bigger bands, but in due time we will talk about the gigs we've been to with smaller ones. Is there anything, before we close, is there anything you'd like to add on the Guns N' Roses situation that you haven't already mentioned?
I would just say that this is actually something that we all need to keep our fingers crossed. We all want to know your opinion. Remember to tweet to Matanza, Mafia-Fedora on Twitter about your opinion. Also about any topics that you would like to hear. Maybe going a bit deeper into our opinions about certain characters within the band. We'd be more than happy to answer.
That's it. Also, next week, week 3, and we'll be recording in a week's time on Sunday, and we'll be talking about the things that I said that I would mention. I will be speaking about my reviews of The Darkness in Southampton, Def Leppard, Whitesnake and Black Star Riders at Wembley Arena. We'll be talking about that as well. We'll be talking, I'm pretty sure there may be a festival announcement in this week that we'll be discussing. If not, we'll talk about...
We'll be talking about Foo Fighters and how they're the band that seem to have essentially the modern variant of what Guns N' Roses have had historically, which is we know about them even if we're not rock fans, and we have appeal, for that band, even if they're not from rock bands and their fandom. Also, we'll be trying to talk about, if we can find time, but we know how cluttered our topics can be at times, we will try and talk about up-and-coming bands that we recommend, and even some obscure artists that you weren't expecting, that we might just want to highlight a few big things for.
That's it. Also, maybe not next week, but one week, I need to talk about the current state of Kiss, who are my all-time favourite band, which at times I'm embarrassed to say. But I'll talk about that because apparently Paul Stanley says they're better than ever. Now they're not. We will speak about that either next week or the week after. It's something that will definitely be discussed. The good thing about here is now that we're back for 12 weeks at least, we can do 12 episodes.
Yeah.
And this is episode 2, and
by the end of the semester, we'll have 13 episodes on my YouTube channel and also on SoundCloud.
Yes, and if for any reason there isn't, we'll do our best to, but we all know how assignments and stuff can catch up, or potentially anything that comes out of life unexpectedly, like, I don't even need to mention it because we know what life's like. Yeah. I've really enjoyed recording this with you today, man. It's been brilliant. Well,
home sweet home.
Any last words?
I'll just say, Matanza out.
Mr. Dupont.